who've written an open letter condemning changes to the benefit system. This came as campaigners who are fighting a cap on some family benefits delivered their message to Downing Street. Sky's Tig Enright reports.
Happy Mother's Day, David Cameron. If the Prime Minister had forgotten about the cap he put on benefits last year, well, now's the chance for a timely reminder.
The cuts are really hitting mums hard. At the same time, millionaires are getting a tax cut. It's so unfair.
People on lower middle incomes, their children aren't having the same start that lots of children could be having. I mean, I'm head teacher for a local school, and it's really important that all children get the same start.
Their delivery's on time, but their message is a little late. The so-called mummy tax is one of a series of welfare curbs announced in the autumn statement. But on this special day for mothers, they found themselves a new ally who wasn't here in person, but was in spirit. The new Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Justin Welby, has added his name to an open letter by 43 bishops condemning all the welfare cuts that are about to happen. He said, "As a civilised society, we have a duty to support those among us who are vulnerable and in need. These changes will mean it's children and families who will pay the price for high inflation rather than the government."
Government takes on seriously the concerns that the Church raises, but we are in very difficult circumstances, and we have to make some tough decisions. And at a time when people's incomes are frozen and not going up in line with inflation, it is right that we also look at possibilities of freezing benefits.
Until now, maternity benefits have gone up in line with inflation, currently 2.7% according to the Consumer Price Index. But from next month, they'll go up by just 1% every year as a 3-year cap on benefits for everyone comes into force. Critics say that by 2015, new mothers will feel a real term squeeze of £180 a year.
One of the big consequences of the cuts to maternity pay and benefits is that women will be returning to work much earlier than they'd like, earlier than they and their baby are ready for. And that's a big problem when that's a result of financial pressures. But on top of that, they're using credit cards and payday loans to be able to fill the gap. And we know that some families are turning to food banks. The situation is not good.
Today's the day when mums are supposed to feel a little more appreciated than usual. Smiles for now, but don't forget that the deficit is growing, not shrinking. So there could be more bad news in the budget later this month. Tig Enright, Sky News, Westminster.
One of the bishops who signed that open letter calling on the government to rethink cuts to welfare is the Bishop of Leicester, the Right Reverend Tim Stevens. He joins us live now from Leicester. Welcome to Sky News. Isn't this rather simplifying the issue, giving this rebuke to the government on Mother's Day, talking about the impact on mothers, when actually we're all in it together, aren't we? We're all having to tighten our belts because of the huge debt that Britain has.
Yes, absolutely. It's right that we should all have to tighten our belts, and we understand the need to manage the deficit. But the Prime Minister has told us that we're all in this together. That means we have a responsibility for each other. And this uprating bill, tying increases to 1% per annum, means that the very poorest families, the ones who spend nearly all their budget on feeding their children or warming their accommodation, are going to be carrying increases in food and fuel of 3, 4, 5 or 6% per year, with increases in benefits of only 1%. They're going to get much, much poorer, and 60% of the burden of this cut is going to fall on the very poorest families, only 3% on the richest. So our objection is not that the deficit doesn't need managing, it's that we need to manage it in a way that doesn't widen already inequalities that are already much too wide.
Let me read you some of the response from the government, the Department for Work and Pensions. It says, simply increasing benefits isn't the answer to tackling poverty. The last decade has shown that. For too long, the welfare system has kept families trapped in a cycle of benefit dependency and made it impossible for many to contemplate moving into work and off benefits. I mean, surely they've got a point. I mean, people who are working are seeing their wages stagnate. They're not even getting a 1% rise.
Well, a very large proportion of the people on benefits are in work. The fact of the matter is that an awful lot of people, including perhaps nurses or primary school teachers or even soldiers in the army, who've got a considerable number of children only survive on benefits. So the argument that we need to keep benefits down in order to incentivize people into work simply doesn't apply here. And what's happening is that these benefits are being reduced at the same time as personal tax allowances are being increased. And that spreads the load right across the population. So many people are getting better off at precisely the time that the poorest are getting much worse off. Our argument is not that the deficit does not need managing. Our argument is that if you push 200,000 children into poverty, you store up long-term social problems, social immobility, and serious difficulties for a generation of poor children who are already struggling. And that's something the government really needs to think about.
But if the government was to heed your call, the Chancellor needs to find savings somewhere. Where else could he look for those savings? What would you suggest?
Well, he's giving a tax handout to the highest earners, reducing their tax burden from 50% to 45%. That means that many people earning 6 or 7 figure sums will be getting a handout from the taxman of about £2,000 a week, precisely at the time that these new welfare cuts are coming through. There really are choices the government can make. They're not easy choices, but there are real choices. And you know, our people in the churches are running food banks, are providing shelter for the homeless. We see at first hand what life is like for the very poorest families. It's very near destitution for some of them, and someone needs to speak for them. And I think it's right that the voice of the bishops should be heard at a time like this. Although we are in difficulties with our economy, we're not in such difficulties that we need to drive the poorest to desperation.
Right, Reverend Tim Stevens, thank you very much for talking to Sky News, the Bishop of Leicester there. Nick Clegg says the Liberal Democrats may no longer be the party of protest, but they haven't lost their identity. The Deputy Prime Minister told activists